Every single morning, before your feet even hit the floor, it's there.
Oh, yeah.
It's just sort of hovering in the back of your mind. You wake up thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
You get dressed and sit in traffic for it. You might have even had a heated argument with your spouse about it, the night before.
It dictates everything.
It dictates where you sleep, what you eat for breakfast, the quality of healthcare you get, and statistically, even how long you're going to live.
It's the single most pervasive force in modern human existence. It's like the water we swim in, the air we breathe.
And yet, and this is the part that always gets me, if we're being totally honest with ourselves, most of us have absolutely no idea what it actually is.
Not really. Not when you get down to it.
We chase it, we hoard it, we lose sleep over it, but we rarely stop to ask, why does this green piece of cotton blend paper or these, pixels on my baking app have any value at all?
Why can you trade this rectangular piece of plastic for a hot meal or a tank of gas? It's a great question.
And here's the part that usually breaks people's brains a little bit.
Money isn't real. Not in the way a house is real, or a cow is real, or a bushel of wheat is real.
It's not backed by gold anymore.
Not for a long, long time. It isn't backed by anything physical.
It's the ultimate Matrix moment.
Yeah.
You take the red pill and you realize the whole economy is, in a sense, a hallucination.
It really is. Money is a collective agreement. It's a shared story that 8 billion of us have decided to believe in simultaneously.
It's a fiction.
But it's the most useful fiction ever invented. I mean, that story has funded wars, it has cured diseases, it's built skyscrapers, and it has trapped billions in poverty. It's the engine of civilization, but it's an engine made entirely of belief.
So today, on Daily New History, we are going to look at the machinery behind that curtain. We are tearing down the complete history of money.
From the very beginning.
We're going from the very first, I'll trade you this chicken, all the way through the gold standard to the 2008 crash, Bitcoin, and the future of the dollar. We have combed through a massive stack of research here. Economic history, anthropology, evolutionary psychology, and the mission is simple.
By the end of this conversation, you will understand money better than 99% of the planet.
And I guarantee you will never look at a dollar bill or your credit card statement the same way again.
I think that's a safe bet.
Welcome to Daily New History. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Nadia.
Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we have to start at the beginning, or I guess what we think is the beginning, because when I think pre-money and when I think about what I learned in high school econ,
right?
I think of barter.
The classic Adam Smith example, the textbook scenario.
Exactly. The story goes like this. I have a cow and I want wheat. You have wheat and maybe you want a cow. We meet in the field, we swap, and everyone is happy.
Simple economics, right?
It feels so intuitive.
It feels intuitive, and it is almost entirely a myth.
Okay, wait, let's unpack this immediately. You're saying the foundational story of economics, the thing in every single textbook, is wrong.
It's a fable, a very convenient fable, but a fable nonetheless. Anthropologists like David Graeber have studied, hunter-gatherer societies and early agricultural communities all over the world.
So real people, not just theoretical models.
Real people, from the tribes of the Amazon to indigenous groups in North America. And do you know what they almost never find?
A barter market.
Yeah, exactly. They almost never find a pure barter economy where people are swapping chickens for shoes on the spot. That whole scenario relies on something economists call the double coincidence of wants.
That sounds complicated.
It just means I have to have exactly what you want, and you have to have exactly what I want at the exact same moment.
Which, practically speaking, is incredibly rare. If I have a cow and I need wheat, but you have wheat and you want, shoes, we're just stuck.
We're totally stuck. The trade doesn't happen. The system grinds to a halt before it even starts.
So how did early humans actually get stuff? I mean, if I needed shoes and I didn't have anything the shoemaker wanted right then, was I just walking around barefoot?
No, you used credit.
Credit. Like a credit card.
Not a Visa card, obviously, but social credit. The system that actually existed was what we call a gift economy. You have to imagine a small tribe or a village of maybe, say, 150 people.
Where everybody knows everybody.
Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows who's a hard worker and who's a slacker. So if you need shoes, you go to the shoemaker and he just gives you the shoes.
And I just say thanks. That's it.
You say thanks, but now you have a reputation debt. It's an informal ledger that exists in the collective mind of the village.
Okay.
So later, when the shoemaker needs fish, and you're a fisherman, you give him fish. It wasn't this for that right in the moment. It was, I help you now, you help me later. Your reputation. That was the original currency.
That makes total sense for a small village where everyone knows your business. If I'm a mooch, everyone knows I'm a mooch, and pretty soon the shoemaker stops giving me shoes.
Precisely. It's a system based on high trust and social enforcement, but that system hits a very hard wall the moment you try to trade with a stranger. If you walk into a neighboring village or you meet a trader from across the sea, they don't know you. They don't care about your reputation. They have no idea if you're good for it.
So trust doesn't scale.
Trust does not scale. To trade with strangers, you need a third party. You need something neutral. You need a medium of exchange that carries its own value so that the trust is in the object, not in the person holding it.
And this is where we get into commodity money. This was the part of the research that really blew my mind. Just the sheer variety of random objects humans have used as cash.
It is wild. The core concept is that money can be literally anything as long as the community agrees it has value.
We're talking cowrie shells, right?
Yeah.
That seems to be the big famous one.
Cowrie shells are a massive part of monetary history. These small, durable shells from the Indian Ocean were used across Africa, Asia, and the Pacific for literally thousands of years.
Thousands.
In some places, they were used as currency for longer than gold has been.
Why shells? I mean, just because they were pretty.
Well, think about the properties you'd want in money. They're durable, you can drop them and they don't break. They're portable, you can carry a pocket full pretty easily. They're fungible.
Fungible meaning one is basically the same as another.
Exactly. But most importantly, they were scarce in the places where they were used. You couldn't just find them in your backyard in West Africa. They had to be imported, which controlled the supply.
So you couldn't just 3D print your own money by walking down to the beach.
You couldn't counterfeit it easily. Scarcity is key. But we have to address the dark side here too. Money is a tool, and tools can be used for evil. Cowrie shells were one of the primary currencies used in the Atlantic slave trade. European traders would source these shells in the Maldives, ship them to West Africa, and use them to purchase human beings.
That is just a chilling reminder. We think of money as this neutral, abstract thing, but it facilitates everything, including the worst atrocities in history.
Absolutely. It turned human life into a countable, tradable commodity. And speaking of commodities, the sources also mention cattle.
Right, the big money of the ancient world.
Literally big.
Yeah.
And in fact, our language hides a lot of this history. The word pecuniary, which implies anything related to money, it comes from the Latin word picus, which means cattle.
No way.
Yeah. If you had cattle, you had capital.
And I saw salary has a weird origin too, something about salt.
Salt. Salt was crucial for survival in the ancient world because it was pretty much the only way to preserve meat. You couldn't live without it. So Roman soldiers were sometimes paid a designated allowance specifically to buy salt.
An allowance for salt.
And that allowance was called a salarium.
Wait, salarium.
Salary.
That's it. So when someone says you are worth your salt, they are literally saying you are worth your wages.
That is fantastic. Okay, so we've got shells, cattle, salt. We also saw tea bricks in Central Asia, tobacco in colonial Virginia, even wampum beads here in North America. It just goes to show that to work as money, an object just needs to hit a few key criteria. We call them the functions of money. It needs to be a store of value. It can't rot like a banana. It needs to be a unit of account so we can measure things in it. And it needs to be a medium of exchange.
But eventually, humanity sort of converged. We stopped using tea and shells and settled on one specific type of material.
Metal.
Metal.
Metal was the game changer. Copper, bronze, silver, gold. It fits all the criteria perfectly. It's incredibly durable. It's divisible. You can melt it down and split it up. And critically, it had intrinsic value. People wanted it for tools or weapons or jewelry anyway.
But initially, it wasn't coins, right? It was just lumps.
It was weight. If you go back to ancient Mesopotamia around 3000 BCE, they used silver shekels. But a shekel wasn't a coin you kept in your pocket. It was a unit of weight, like a pound or a kilogram.
So every time you bought something?
Every single time, you had to get out a scale, weigh the silver, and maybe even cut a piece off a silver bar to get the right weight.
That sounds incredibly tedious. Hold on, let me just get my scale out and chop up this silver bar to buy this loaf of bread.
It was very high-friction commerce. And on top of that, you had to trust the purity, too. How do you know that silver isn't mixed with cheap lead? You'd have to assay it. That friction really limited the speed and scale of trade.
And that friction is what led to the next massive innovation.
Exactly. It happened around 600 BCE in a kingdom called Lydia, which is in modern-day Turkey.
This is the story of King Croesus, right? The richest Croesus guy.
That's the one. King Croesus and his father, Alyattes. They had access to the Pactolus River, which was rich in something called electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver mixed together.
Okay, so it's a mix.
It's a mix. But the problem with electrum is that the ratio changes. One nugget might be 60% gold, another only 40%. So the value was really inconsistent.
So you never knew what your money was actually worth from one transaction to the next.
Precisely. So the king had a brilliant idea. He took a specific amount of this metal, purified it to a standard level, and stamped it with the royal emblem, the head of a lion.
And that stamp was a guarantee.
It was a guarantee. It said, I, the king, certify that this piece of metal weighs exactly this much and is exactly this pure.
And suddenly you stop weighing and you start counting.
That shift from weighing to counting is one of the biggest leaps in economic history. Rich as Croesus became a saying for a reason. Lydia exploded with wealth because trade became so much faster, so much more efficient. You didn't need a scale anymore. You just needed to see the lion's head.
But there was another side effect they discovered, which I think is just fascinating. Coins were the first mass media.
This is huge. Think about it. In the ancient world, there are no newspapers, no TV, no internet. Most of the population is illiterate. How does a king tell his subjects who's in charge? How do you project your power to the furthest edges of your empire?
You put your face on the money.
You put your faith on the one thing that everybody has to touch every single day. Alexander the Great was one of the first to really lean into this. He put his face on coins to project his authority across all his conquests. It was branding.
It's absolute political branding. This metal is valuable, and I am the one who guarantees it. My face is the guarantee.
The Romans took this to the absolute next level. Every time a new emperor took over, which, often happened by assassinating the old one, the very first thing he did was mint new coins with his face on them.
A signal to the whole empire.
It was a way of saying, there's a new boss in town, I am the state, the money is valid because I say it is.
But the Romans also taught us a very, very painful lesson about what happens when the government messes with that guarantee. This brings us to the cautionary tale of the Roman denarius.
This is the story that every modern central banker still has nightmares about.
So Rome had the denarius, the silver coin. It was the dollar of its day.
The denarius was the standard, yeah. It's where we get the word dinar in Arabic and dinero in Spanish. For a long time, it was very high-purity silver. But running the Roman Empire was incredibly expensive.
Armies, roads.
Massive standing armies, a huge bureaucracy, and you had bread and circuses. Free food and entertainment to keep the population from revolting.
And politicians always want to spend more money than they have.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed in 2,000 years.
It is a universal constant of politics.
Right.
But the emperors couldn't just print money because they didn't have paper, so they did something else, something called debasement.
Debasement.
The Emperor Nero was one of the first to really start doing this. Would recall the old silver coins, melt them down, and then mix in some cheap base metal like copper or tin and remint them.
So you'd get more coins that have the same amount of silver.
Exactly. So maybe it looks the same, but now it's only 80% silver, then 60%. Then, a few decades later, it's down to 5%. By the 3rd century, the silver coins were basically just bronze with a thin wash of silver on top that would literally rub off in your hand.
And the market isn't stupid. I mean, people must have realized the money was junk.
The market always knows. Merchants realized the coins were worth less, so they demanded more of them for the same goods. A loaf of bread that cost 1 denarius eventually cost hundreds.
That's hyperinflation.
It was hyperinflation. The savings of the entire Roman middle class were completely wiped out. The economy ground to a halt.
And didn't Emperor Diocletian try to fix it with price controls?
He did. It was a classic political move. In 301 CE, he issued the Edict on Maximum Prices. It was a huge list of price caps for everything from wheat to lions for the arena, and the penalty for charging more was death.
That seems motivational. Sell bread at this price or we kill you.
You'd think it would work, but it failed miserably. Merchants just stopped selling. I mean, if you force a baker to sell bread for less than it costs him to bake it, he stops baking. It just created massive shortages and drove everything into black markets. The formal economy completely collapsed. It's a history lesson we keep relearning. You cannot legislate the value of money if the underlying trust is gone.
While Rome was collapsing, though, the East was innovating. We have to talk about China, because they were way, way ahead of the curve on this stuff.
Centuries ahead. While Europe was entering the Dark Ages, China was inventing the future of finance.
They had those cool coins with the square holes in the middle.
Right, the cash coins. The whole was practical. It was so you could string them together in standard amounts. But the real revolution, the thing that changed everything, was paper.
The invention of paper money.
It started in the Tang Dynasty around the 7th century. Merchants got really tired of carrying heavy strings of thousands of bronze coins. It was incredibly heavy and dangerous.
So they came up with a better way.
They started depositing their coins with a trusted agent, like a wholesaler or an early banker, and getting a paper receipt for them. They called it flying cash because it was so light it could literally blow away in the wind.
And then pretty soon people realized, why go back and get the heavy coins? I'll just trade the receipt instead.
Exactly. The receipt itself became the money. It was a claim on the money, which was just as good. By the Song Dynasty, around the year 1000, the government took over the idea and issued the first official government-backed paper money called jiaozi.
So this is the first real fiat currency.
Effectively, yes. Initially, it was backed by reserves of coin or silk. You could, in theory, go and redeem it. But just like Rome, the temptation was too strong.
Here we go again.
It's the same cycle. The Song Dynasty, then the Mongols under Kublai Khan, then the Ming. They all eventually printed way too much paper to fund wars and grand projects.
And the result was always the same.
Hyperinflation, loss of faith, and economic collapse. It got so bad that the Ming Dynasty actually gave up on paper money entirely in 1450 and went back to using silver lumps. They just couldn't resist the printing press.
But the innovation had happened. I remember that anecdote about Marco Polo.
Oh, it's amazing. When Marco Polo visited China, he was just flabbergasted. He wrote about it like it was sorcery or alchemy. He could not believe you could buy real pearls and gold with a piece of mulberry bark that was stamped by the emperor.
To a European, it must have seemed like magic, turning paper into gold.
It is alchemy, but it's social alchemy, not chemical alchemy. It works because of belief. The emperor says this piece of paper is worth 10 coins, and if you refuse to accept it, you might lose your head. So people believe it.
Let's jump back to Europe, specifically the Renaissance in Italy, because this is where the banking system as we know it really starts to form, and it all starts on a bench.
The Banco. In medieval Italy, specifically in places like Florence and Venice, trade was booming. But you had all these different currencies from different city-states, so money changers would sit on a bench in the market square to swap them. Banco is Italian for bench.
And that's where we get the word bank.
That's the word.
And I love the etymology of what happened if they went bust.
If a banker made bad deals and couldn't pay his debts, the authorities or, the angry mob would come and smash his bench to splinters.
Bancarota.
Broken bench, which gives us the word bankrupt.
That is such a vivid, wonderful image. So, besides smashing furniture, what did these guys invent that changed the world?
They solved a huge logistics problem, which is that moving money is dangerous. If you're a merchant in Florence and you need to buy wool in London, carrying a chest full of gold coins across the Alps is a great way to get robbed or murdered.
Not a good business model.
Not at all. So families like the Medici developed the letter of credit. You deposit your gold in the Medici Bank in Florence. The banker gives you a piece of paper, a coded letter. You travel to London, take that letter to the Medici's partner there, and he gives you the local currency. The gold never moves.
It's like teleporting money.
It's essentially teleporting value. And the Medici used the wealth from this system to become the most powerful family in Europe. They bought the papacy, they bought armies, they married their children into royal families. They proved that if you control the ledger, you control the world.
And they also popularized something that sounds really boring, but was actually revolutionary.
Double entry bookkeeping.
Right.
It sounds like an accountant's homework, but it was maybe the greatest financial innovation of the era. For the first time, you could track vast, complex empires of trade with mathematical precision, spot fraud, and truly understand profit and loss. It allowed finance to scale.
Speaking of scaling up and controlling the ledger, that brings us to the era of central banks. This is where things get really formalized and a lot more powerful.
The big shift happens in 1694 with the creation of the Bank of England. And once again, its origin story is war.
It always seems to be a war.
War is expensive. King William III needed money to fight France. He was broke. He couldn't raise taxes anymore without a revolt.
So he makes a deal with the devil, or at least with the merchants.
He made a deal with a group of wealthy private lenders. They said, we will lend you 1.2 million pounds in gold to build your navy. But in return, we want a royal charter. We want the exclusive right to issue banknotes for the government.
And that's the model. The government gets cash for war, and a private bank gets the privilege of printing the national currency.
Correct. It created the concept of a lender of last resort, a central institution to backstop the whole system. But in America, we hated this idea.
We really did. The early United States had this deep cultural distrust of centralized financial power. We saw it as a tool of the British aristocracy we had just fought a war to get away from.
Alexander Hamilton, of course, wanted a central bank to stabilize the young nation's finances. He got one, but it was incredibly controversial. And later, Andrew Jackson called the central bank a monster.
He made it his personal mission to kill it.
And he succeeded. He vetoed the charter renewal of the Second Bank of the United States, famously declaring it was trying to kill him, but he would kill it.
And because Jackson killed the central bank, the 19th century in America was just absolute financial chaos.
It was the era of wildcat banking. Since there was no single federal currency, any private bank could just open up, sometimes literally in the wilderness where the wildcats roamed, and print their own notes.
So you had thousands of different currencies floating around.
Thousands. You'd have a Bank of Tennessee dollar and a Railroad Bank of Ohio dollar, and half of them were worthless because the banks would just disappear overnight. The system was incredibly unstable.
And the economy would just crash constantly. Panic of 1837, Panic of 1857, Panic of 1873. It just kept happening.
Until the big one, the Panic of 1907. The system nearly imploded completely, the stock market crashed, banks were falling like dominoes, and there was no government backstop, there was no Federal Reserve to save the day.
So who fixed it? One guy.
J.P. Morgan. The actual man, not the bank. He was so powerful, so central to the system, that he literally locked the leading bankers of New York in his private library on 36th Street, locked the door, and refused to let them out until they agreed to pool their money and bail out the failing trust companies.
That is an incredible image.
Yeah.
Just one guy smoking a cigar, holding the entire U.S. economy together by sheer force of will.
It worked, but it terrified the politicians. They realized, we cannot have a modern economy that relies on the mood of one wealthy man to save the country. What if Morgan wasn't there? What if he was in a bad mood?
Right.
That realization led directly to the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913.
It was a compromise system, though, wasn't it?
Right. To deal with that American fear of centralized power, it's not fully public, not fully private. It's this hybrid structure, a network of regional banks with oversight from a board in Washington, D.C. It was designed to bring stability and elasticity to the money supply.
Stability. Which brings us to the gold standard. People talk about the gold standard with such nostalgia today. If only we were back on gold, everything would be fine.
It's the good old days syndrome. And there were benefits. The classical gold standard, from roughly 1870 to 1914, was a period of incredible stability in global trade.
Because exchange rates were fixed.
Exactly. If you had a $20 bill, you could walk into a bank and demand an ounce of gold. The pound was worth a set amount of gold. The franc was worth a set amount of gold. It made international business very predictable. And it forced fiscal discipline on governments.
You couldn't just print more money than you had gold in the vault.
It was a very strict discipline. But that discipline has a major downside. It acts as a golden straitjacket.
How so?
When World War I hit, countries needed to spend way more than they had gold for. You can't tell your army, sorry, we can't buy any more bullets because we don't have enough shiny rocks in the vault. So one by one, they all suspended the gold standard to print money for the war effort.
And when they tried to go back after the war,
it was a disaster, and it played a huge role in making the Great Depression so great. This is the part gold bugs often miss.
Okay.
When the economy crashed in 1929, there was a massive deflationary spiral. Prices were falling, businesses were closing. The government needed to pump money into the system to stop the bleeding. But the gold standard said no.
You can't print money if you don't have the gold.
Correct. It prevented any kind of stimulus. It turned a bad recession into a catastrophic depression. And the historical data is very clear on this. The countries that abandoned the gold standard first, like Britain, were the ones that recovered the fastest.
So in the U.S., FDR finally had to make a really radical move.
He did. In 1933, he actually made it illegal for U.S. citizens to own gold coins or bullion.
That is just wild to think about. You could go to jail for having a gold coin in your safe deposit box.
You could, and that law stayed on the books until 1974. He demanded everyone turn in their gold to the government in exchange for paper dollars. He did this so he could devalue the dollar against gold and print more money to stimulate the economy. It was the only way to break the handcuffs.
Then, after World War II, a new system is born at Bretton Woods.
Right. By 1944, the U.S. was the only major economy left standing, and we held most of the world's gold. So we basically dictated the new rules.
And the rules were?
The new system was, every other major currency is pegged to the U.S. dollar, and the U.S. dollar, in turn, is pegged to gold at a fixed rate of $35 an ounce.
So the dollar became the global reserve currency.
It was officially enthroned. The dollar was good as gold.
But by the 1960s, the cracks started showing in that system, too.
The U.S. was spending a lot of money. We had the Vietnam War. We had President Johnson's Great Society social programs. We were printing many more paper dollars than we actually had gold in Fort Knox to back them up.
And the French figured it out.
The French, under President Charles de Gaulle, called our bluff. He was very skeptical of American power and basically said, this is a scam. We have all these dollars. We'd like our gold now, please. And they sent warships to New York Harbor to pick it up.
They sent warships.
To redeem their dollars for bullion. It was a run on the bank, but the bank was the United States Treasury.
And that forces the hand of President Nixon in 1971.
This is the Nixon shock. August 15th, 1971. Nixon goes on TV. He famously interrupted the most popular show on TV, Bonanza, and announces that, essentially, we are closing the gold window.
No more trading dollars for gold.
No more. He said it was a temporary suspension.
Narrator voice. It was not temporary.
It was permanent. In that one moment, the entire world switched from a gold-backed system to a pure fiat currency system.
Let's define that term clearly for everyone listening. What is fiat?
Fiat is Latin for let it be done, or by decree. It means the money has value only because the government says it does, and because we all agree to trust that decree. There is no physical asset behind it, just the full faith and credit of the United States.
This is a huge, huge turning point. Since 1971, the fundamental nature of money changed. And the value of the dollar has changed, too.
Dramatically. Since Nixon closed the gold window, the U.S. dollar has lost somewhere between 85% and 90% of its purchasing power.
That's the trade-off, isn't it? We gained the flexibility to manage the economy, to fight recessions, to print trillions of dollars during the COVID pandemic, but the cost is persistent, guaranteed inflation.
Exactly. In a fiat system, your cash is like an ice cube on a hot day. It melts a little bit every single year. If you just hold on to it, it slowly disappears.
Which changes how we all have to behave with our money. We can't just save cash under the mattress anymore. The system forces us to become investors.
The system is designed to punish savers and reward borrowers and investors. It forces you to spend or invest to stay ahead of inflation. If you just hoard cash, you lose. This is also where you see wealth inequality start to really accelerate because asset prices, stocks, real estate tend to rise much faster than wages in this kind of system.
Right.
So if you own assets, you get rich. If you just work for wages, you struggle to keep up.
So let's pivot to the consumer side of this. Because while the government was going off gold, regular people were moving to plastic. The credit card revolution.
It started with a guy named Frank McNamara. The origin story is that he was having a big business dinner with clients in New York City in 1950. When the bill came, he realized he had left his wallet in another suit.
Oh, the ultimate embarrassment.
He was mortified. He had to call his wife to drive over with cash to pay the tab, and he swore to himself this would never happen again.
And that's how the credit card was born.
He created the Diners Club card. At first, it was just a little cardboard card that let members sign for dinner at a handful of restaurants and then pay the bill at the end of the month.
But it changed our psychology, didn't it? It wasn't just about convenience.
Profoundly. There is a concept in behavioral economics called the pain of paying. When you physically hand over a crisp $100 bill, your brain actually registers a tiny bit of pain. It feels like a loss. You hesitate.
But when you just swipe a card or tap your phone,
the pain is almost gone. It separates the pleasure of buying from the pain of paying. It makes the transaction abstract. And study after study shows people spend significantly more, sometimes up to 100% more, when using cards versus cash for the same purchase.
And then came a crucial legal change, the Marquette decision in 1978.
This was the decision that opened the floodgates for consumer debt. The Supreme Court ruled that a national bank could charge interest rates based on where the bank was located, not where the customer lived.
So all the big banks moved their credit card operations to states with no interest rate caps.
Hello, Delaware and South Dakota. Suddenly charging 20, 25, even 30% interest became legal nationwide. We shifted from a culture of saving to a culture of debt. Usury, which had been illegal for centuries, became the dominant business model of modern banking.
Fast forward to 2008, the great financial crisis. This is where the modern understanding of money really got tested. And this is where we need to explain something that I think confuses 90% of people: how banks actually create money.
This is the big secret. Most people think banks are just simple intermediaries. You deposit your money in a savings account and they lend that same money out to someone else.
Like a warehouse for money.
Right. But that's not how it works at all. The system is called fractional reserve banking. When you walk into a bank and get approved for a mortgage for, say, $500,000, the bank doesn't go to its vault and move a stack of someone else's cash into your box.
So where does the money come from?
They simply type the numbers into a computer. They credit your account with $500,000. They create that money out of thin air with a keystroke.
The money didn't exist until I signed the loan paper.
Correct. The loan creates the deposit. The money is backed only by your promise to pay it back over the next 30 years.
Sure.
Commercial banks, not the government, create the vast majority of the money in our economy.
So in 2008, when the housing bubble burst,
The banks had created trillions of dollars in loans for houses that weren't actually worth the price. When millions of people stopped paying their mortgages, all that money that had been created just vanished from their balance sheets.
Yeah.
The assets backing the loans were worthless.
and Lehman Brothers collapses, the whole system freezes.
The entire global financial system was on the brink of collapse. And that's when we saw the response: quantitative easing.
The QE.
QE, this was the Federal Reserve stepping in. Since the private banks were terrified and weren't creating any new money through loans, the Fed fired up its own digital printing press. They created trillions of new dollars out of thin air to buy toxic bonds from the banks and save the system.
And people were furious. You had Occupy Wall Street on the left, the Tea Party on the right. It felt like the game was completely rigged. The banks get bailed out, regular people lose their homes.
And that anger, that deep sense of betrayal and distrust in the system, is exactly what birthed Bitcoin.
The crypto rebellion.
You cannot separate the invention of Bitcoin from the 2008 crisis. The timing is exact. The very first block of Bitcoin transactions, the Genesis block, was mined in January 2009 by the anonymous creator Satoshi Nakamoto.
And there was a message hidden in it, right?
Hidden in the code of that first block was a headline from the Times of London: Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks.
So it was a protest. It was a political statement written in code.
It was a technological attempt to build a new financial system from the ground up. One that replaces trust in fallible humans like central bankers with trust in mathematics and cryptography. Bitcoin is a fixed supply. There will only ever be 21 million coins. No one can print more. No one can debase it.
Digital gold.
That's the vision: a censorship-resistant, non-sovereign money that no government can control. But the reality, as we've seen, has been a lot messier.
How so?
Well, Bitcoin has largely succeeded as a speculative asset. If you bought it 10 years ago, you're very wealthy now. It was the best performing asset of the decade, but it has mostly failed as a daily currency. It's just too volatile. You can't buy a cup of coffee with something that might drop 10% in an hour.
And it spawned a whole casino of scams. FTX, meme coins, all of that.
The crypto world became this wild mix of genuinely revolutionary technology and the oldest financial frauds in the book, but it forced a global conversation, and it definitely scared the central banks.
And now they're developing their own version.
Now we have CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. This is the Empire Strikes Back.
The Empire Strikes Back. I like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
China is already rolling out its digital yuan. The Federal Reserve is actively researching a digital dollar. The idea is, why do we even need commercial banks as middlemen? You could just have an account directly with the Fed on your phone.
But that sounds like a privacy nightmare. Total surveillance.
It is the ultimate surveillance tool. With physical cash, you have anonymity. With a CBDC, the government could see every single transaction you make in real time. Theoretically, they could even program the money.
Program it how?
They could say, you can't use this money to buy gasoline, or this money expires in 30 days if you don't spend it, to stimulate the economy. It's incredibly efficient, but it's also potentially very dystopian.
Let's zoom out to the geopolitical map for a minute, because right now, the US dollar is king. It's the world's reserve currency.
We call it America's exorbitant privilege because the world trades in dollars, oil is priced in dollars, commodities are priced in dollars, everyone needs them. This creates a constant global demand for our currency.
Which lets us do what?
It allows the U.S. to borrow very cheaply and run massive deficits that other countries couldn't get away with. We can essentially print money to pay our bills, and the rest of the world absorbs it.
But we've weaponized it too.
We have. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the U.S. and its allies froze Russia's central bank reserves, hundreds of billions of dollars. We basically turned off their money with the flip of a switch.
And that sent a message to the rest of the world.
It scared a lot of other countries. China, Russia, Brazil, India. They are now actively looking for alternatives. They don't want their entire national savings to be dependent on Washington's good mood. They're trying to de-dollarize.
So is the dollar dying? Is its reign over?
I wouldn't say dying, but it might be slowly losing its absolute monopoly. The dollar is very entrenched, but history shows that no single currency reigns forever. The British pound ruled the world for over a century, the Dutch guilder before that. Now they're just normal currencies. We might be moving from a unipolar financial world to a multipolar one.
So we've covered thousands of years of history, banking, crypto, geopolitics. But I want to bring this all down to the listener. What does all this mean for my wallet, for my personal finances?
This is the so what question. Understanding history is useless if you don't apply it. And the biggest takeaway is understanding the rules of the game we are all playing right now in this fiat currency era.
And the number one rule is that the game is inflationary.
The system is designed to inflate. The Fed officially targets 2% inflation per year. That means the philosophy of cash is trash is, unfortunately, true as a long-term store of value. You have to own assets.
Things that can't be printed.
Exactly. Stocks, real estate, a business, things that have scarcity and will rise in price as the supply of money increases.
And what about debt? How should we think about debt in this system?
You have to distinguish between debt that kills you and debt that can actually build wealth. In an inflationary system, a long-term fixed-rate mortgage can be a powerful tool.
How so?
You borrow dollars that are valuable today, and you pay that loan back over 30 years with dollars that are worth less and less each year. Inflation is secretly eating away at your debt for you.
But credit card debt
Is a wealth transfer from you to the bank. It's a wealth destruction. The high interest rates, 20% or more, utterly negate any benefit from inflation and will trap you. It's the single biggest obstacle to building wealth for most people.
And psychologically, what does this history teach us about our own brains?
It teaches us that we are hardwired to be bad at this. Our brains evolved in a very different environment. We have loss aversion. We fear losing $100 way more than we enjoy gaining $100, which makes us scared of investing. We have present bias. Our brain wants the pleasure of spending now rather than the delayed gratification of saving for later.
So we're fighting our own hunter-gatherer brains every time we look at our bank account.
We are. Financial literacy at its core is really just learning to hack your own psychology to survive and thrive in a modern fiat world that our brains were not built for.
I love that framing, hacking your psychology. We've covered a massive amount of ground here. From the myth of barter to the reality of the Fed and Bitcoin, what is the one big idea you want the listener to walk away with?
That money is a social technology. It's a tool we invented to coordinate human cooperation on a massive scale. It isn't a force of nature like gravity. It's a story.
And because it's a story, the ending isn't written yet. The story can change.
Exactly. And when trust in that story breaks, like in Weimar, Germany, or Zimbabwe, or Venezuela, the story ends in absolute disaster. But understanding how the machine works gives you power. Don't let finance be this mysterious, intimidating fog. It's just a game with a set of rules. If you learn the rules, you can play the game rather than being played by it.
Here's a final thought for you to chew on. We've talked about how money has changed forms, from shells and metal to paper, and now purely digital bits. If money is just information, just a ledger of who owes what happens when artificial intelligence starts managing that ledger? What happens when algorithmic traders aren't just part of the market, but they are the entire market?
That's a whole other conversation, a very interesting one.
Something to mull over. We hope this conversation blew your mind a little bit. If you learned something, please share this with someone you know.